Students are generally poor note takers, but they are not to blame for being poor note takers. Rarely are students taught how to take effective notes. Plus, when you are new to a topic, like students watching or listening to a lesson are, it's really challenging to identify the key concepts and ideas from the sea of information. Kira, who is likely the world's master note taking researcher, has reported that students record, on average, only one third of important ideas from a lesson. As you can imagine, this number varies widely from study to study, likely depending on factors like the complexity and cognitive load of a lesson, the ability to control the speed of the lesson, like they could with a video lecture, familiarity with the topic, the length of the lesson, and so on. But the point is that students are likely to miss at least some of a lesson's important ideas. Also, students' notes tend to omit important details, context, and other essential qualifiers that add clarity to the main ideas. For example, a student learning about the planets might have in their notes 3 months without indicating what for. 3 months for what? Students do tend to capture the main ideas from a lesson in their notes, but not so often important content or qualifiers that are needed to make sense of the main ideas. Kira's research shows the more subordinate the lesson ideas are, the less likely students will record them in their notes. Here we can see a representation of what participants in one study captured in their notes according to the hierarchy of ideas. The researchers found that the most superordinate level ideas were recorded at 91%, but the more subordinate ideas were, the less likely they were to be noted. And we can apply this to a concrete example. Let's say a student is taking notes on a lesson on note taking. A first level idea, such as note taking increases achievement, is very likely to make it into the notes. A subordinate idea from that is that this occurs through the process and product functions of note taking. Then, one level down, we have a clarifying detail specifically about the process function, and that is that it involves the activity or act of note taking. Finally, a subordinate detail to support that idea that the process function is measured by comparing the achievement of note takers and listeners is not too likely to appear in the typical student's notes. So, this helps to illustrate how incomplete students' notes can be. Also, students' notes tend to lack organization. Further, students don't tend to take time after a lesson to organize their notes, and as a result, they study and memorize isolated facts in a piecemeal fashion rather than looking for connections and overall structure. Kira illustrated this problem with a demo in one of his books. So, here your job is to look over the notes and decide what disease Mr. Young has. The chart says you have 2 minutes, but I'm only going to give you a fraction of that. This is tricky, right? So, here, when the notes are more organized and complete, it is much easier to see the relationships among the items and to figure out that Mr. Young has mono. Here's another quick demo. Imagine these words represent ideas found in your notes that you need to learn for a test. Some of these words relate to one another, but as Kira and others have argued, students don't often represent those relationships in their notes and tend to study course ideas in a piecemeal fashion as independent ideas. However, if we organize these words according to the broader concepts that they represent, they become much easier to think about and remember. The next point here is that note taking is cognitively demanding. Note taking involves comprehending something new, selecting which information to note, and the act of recording that information all at once. And if the lesson is an in person lecture, students can't pause the flow of information to think and catch up with their notes, and they can't rewind. Finally, what students tend to do with their notes isn't very efficient. While rereading notes is better than not rereading notes, it is highly ineffective in comparison to other study techniques, such as practicing remembering or retrieval practice. Next, we will take a look at what can students do to improve their note taking and what can instructors do to improve students' note taking.